to him. And Kelly Douglas Brown says that these stereotypes served one clear purpose: to justify and rationalize the brutality that would be imposed upon him. So when he was beaten, he got what he deserved. He had to be put in his place. And that mentality has come down through the centuries. So it doesn't matter whether it's Rodney King surrounded by 8 police who for 15 minutes take turns beating him, and when questioned later they said he was strong as a bear and we feared for our lives, though he was unarmed, and they had 2 guns apiece, nightsticks, shotgun in the trunk, tasers, police radio. But the 8 of them said that they were scared of him, that he was strong as a bear. He was not a bear, he was a man. But the mentality is that we are scared of him, and he must have done something to make them cops whoop him like that, because he must have gotten what he deserved. To Emmett Till, a 12-year-old boy on vacation from Chicago, who they say he whistled at a white woman when she walked down the street. In a Southern culture, when it says when a white woman cries, a black man dies. Wasn't too long ago. I ain't trying to offend nobody, but that's American history. And as the Jews say about the Holocaust, we will never forget. There's some things we will never forget. And a gang of men took him out of his auntie's house, took him out, tortured him all night long, castrated him, stuck his private parts in his mouth, pulled his eye out, cut his throat, pulled his tongue through, ripped open his innards, broke both his legs, bashed in his skull. And nobody was arrested, nobody was convicted, and the white press said, what did he do to bring this on himself? His mother, so outraged, said, I'm going to have an open casket funeral so the world can see the brutality that is regularly imposed on black men in this racist, segregated culture, in that good, respectable Bible belt where holy words were in hellish hands. Down to a Trayvon Martin who could be chased down, attacked, and shot dead, and his assailant not be arrested. And people wonder, well, what did he do? What's the man's side of the story? Fear. Fear. He must have done something. Even though the Zimmerman was 100 pounds stronger than him and Zimmerman had the gun, he must have done something. After all, you know, they're faster than a speeding bullet. They're more powerful than a locomotive. They can leap tall buildings in a single bound. Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's Super Negro. And I was afraid. Years ago, when I was a student at Colgate Rochester Divinity School, myself and Percy Reeves both had been college athletes, but who were at the top of our class academically, on the president's list, got an award at the annual convocation when all of the trustees for the school came together, the entire student body, the entire faculty, when they had the graduation, and part of it was giving out student awards, and we got awards for academic achievement and student involvement. And we got our awards. They were handed to us by a woman who was on the board of trustees, handed us our awards, lauded us as examples of how the Church of Jesus Christ was in good hands going forward with young men like us going into ministry. We smiled, we took a picture with her. As fate would have it, when the ceremony was over, Percy and I decided we were going to go work out at Colgate Rochester, or not Colgate Rochester, but at University of Rochester, 2.5 miles down the road. We lifted some weights, we ran, played some basketball. You know, I was 24 years old at the time. I could do all of that in the same day without taking a leave. Jogged back home most of the way, stopped at McDonald's and pigged out, and then we were walking the rest of the way because post-pig out, there was no more running. And as we were coming along Mount Hope Avenue, we saw a car off to the side with his emergency flashers on. So we approached to see if we could be some help. As we got close to the car, we noticed that's the lady on the board of the trustees for the school who just handed us our awards about 4 hours earlier. We went up to the car, tapped on the window to ask if she needed some help, and the woman immediately locked all the locks and started waving, "Leave me alone. I don't need any help." We said, "Ma'am, we just want to help." She said, "No, leave me alone." We said, "Don't you remember us from the school earlier?" And she started screaming. So we walked on. We thought, we gave her the benefit of the doubt. Well, it's because we're men. A woman on the side of the street, any man is a threat. I get it. But as we looked back and we got about a block away, another white man came along, offered her help, and she rolled down the window and then opened the door, and he started to help her. Both of us had the same reaction. We went back to the campus, took the award she had handed us, and we threw them in the garbage because they meant nothing to us. Because what she had demonstrated to us, and a lesson that we learned, is that under controlled circumstances, we could be lifted up as a model student. Under controlled circumstances, we could be a trusted and cherished colleague with whom she had the most charmed of relationship. Under controlled circumstance, we could be received as an acceptable son-in-law. Under controlled circumstance, we could probably even be her lover. But on the street, we were suspicious. Well, my message to you this morning, my friends, is I am not suspicious. Fear. That fear has come down so that when they tell you of a Zimmerman who's got blacks in his friendship circles and in his families, he may have. And your best friend and your boyfriend may be black. That does not mean you have not breathed the air. Such that under certain circumstances, that toxic waste has not found its way into your DNA. So your intuitive and reflexive reaction to the same people who you befriend in certain circumstances under another set of circumstances, they look to you as suspicious. Well, we got to deal with Zimmerman because this stuff is learned and it runs deep. We also got to deal with Zimmerman because of his hate and his resentment. Listen, post-slavery, there was a book that came out and talked about how there is no hate and resentment deeper and more profound and intense than that of a former slaveholder toward a former slave. And you know, that's really at the root of Paul's New Testament letter to Philemon, a slaveholder who had a slave that ran away, Onesimus, who ran to Paul. Paul converted him to the faith and wanted him to send him back to Philemon, not to be his slave, but to be a brother. And he had to deal with Philemon's anger over this slave having left because he thought he had been so good to his slave and that he was a happy little slave. You know, they say, rabbit hunting is no fun when the rabbit has the gun. So don't speak for the rabbit. The slave may seem happy to the slave master, but that's the slave. And that hate in the psycho-emotional power game between the powerful and the powerless, the consciousless power and the powerless conscious. When the previously enslaved or oppressed or dominated one begins to rise, there is resentfulness over that rise by those who were previously held up as superior. It's the same when men and women, and when women rise, there's the resentfulness of men toward the rise of women. Years ago, when I was at First Shiloh Baptist Church in Buffalo, New York, when we ordained for the first time women to the deacon ministry, they had been deaconesses, but not deacons. And the difference is the deaconesses did all the work. And the deacons voted behind closed doors. They had all the power. So the women had the responsibility without authority, which is slavery. And the men had authority without responsibility, which is tyranny. And God is not in favor of slavery or tyranny. So since the black church had been such a vanguard for justice from without, I thought it needed a little bit of justice from within on gender issues. And so we moved to remove the S and just be deacons, man and female, who shared in the power and in the responsibilities. And one of my deacons, who spoke for the others, who were quiet conspirators with him, said, Pastor, if you ordain my wife, then you're suggesting that she's equal with me and you're diminishing my manhood. I said, Deke. And I won't call his name because he may have family here. I said, Deke, well, the Bible says, be not unequally yoked together. So if your wife is less than you, y'all wasn't supposed to be together in the first place. And since you believe that only another man is equal to you, then I'm assuming that you're in support of same-sex relationships, because that'd be the only person who could be equally yoked with you in your theology. He didn't have a comeback for that one. But it's the resentfulness of a woman who begins to rise, and men hate that aggressive woman. Got names for her, because her rise feels emasculating. And there's the resentfulness as those formerly enslaved and segregated and legally excluded, as they begin to rise. That's why there's so much antipathy for affirmative action, because it seems like you're getting something at my expense. And all the history has been, you got something at my expense. That racism was the privilege and the preferential treatment of this country. That's why Clinton was dealing with the angry white man in the 1990s. That's why President Obama, giving a State of the Union address, whatever you think about his politics, being called a liar from the chambers of the Congress with the whole government infrastructure there. It never happened to Nixon. He was impeached. It didn't happen to, or he resigned. It didn't happen to Clinton. He was having funny recreation in the Oval Office. And yet, when someone who represents the former oppressed gets in the office, there's not the same respect for the office, because there are people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. They cannot deal with living in America where being black and brown and female doesn't mean being behind. We got to keep him in our place, the lady said on the campaign trail. What is his place? Beneath me. The hate and the resentment. That's what was at the root of lynching. The resentment that those we once had underfoot, now they're walking around sitting in the same places as us. That's the kind of resentment that caused three men to go out and grab James Byrd in 1998 in Jasper, Texas, and hook him up with cow chains, drag him 3 miles behind their truck until his head and his arm fell off, and then dumped his body in the graveyard. That's what caused 7 young white youth in 2011 in Jackson, Mississippi, after a drinking party in a cul-de-sac suburban community, to go looking for some black folks to mess with, and found 47-year-old James Craig, an auto worker, in a parking lot outside the little diner, and they grabbed him and they beat him senselessly. And then after they beat him and 7 of the boys took off, one of the boys remained with 2 girls with him in the car, and they saw him staggering down the street, almost unconscious, bleeding, and they hit the gas and ran him over and crushed him. And then he joined his friends at McDonald's and said, I ran the nigga over. That's what causes a lot of people to look at Obama and say, he's such a snob because he's smarter than me. Because he was at the top of his class and you were at a C+. You had 2 parents with college degrees, and his mama died and his daddy left, and he still got out in front of me. That uppity Negro. Got to deal with Zimmerman. Zimmerman's got to confess it and change it, because Obama didn't do nothing to deserve to be called a liar during the State of the Union address. Well, Zimmerman's got to acknowledge and confess the devaluation of black life. What do I mean? How many of y'all remember the movie A Time to Kill? Matthew McConaughey, Samuel L. Jackson. A little girl is savagely raped and brutalized by two drunken white pickup truck Confederate flag waving types. And Samuel Jackson, her father, when she miraculously survives, he finds out who they are. He waits in the courthouse and he shoots them and kills them. And he goes to court. Now what's going to become of him? Matthew McConaughey, young white attorney, takes his case and has to provide a defense. And it divides the community. In the closing scene that makes the movie immortal, Matthew McConaughey is giving his closing arguments, and he goes through meticulous detail of what these two men did to this girl. He says a 10-year-old girl, first he asks the jury, close your eyes. 10-year-old girl walking home from school, grabbed by these two drunken men who had liquor in their veins and fire in their loins. Grabbed a 10-year-old pre-puberty little girl, savagely raped her in turn over and over again, polluting her womb and destroying it so that there'd be no potential for life if she lived. They then were so depraved in that moment, when they got done doing that, they slapped her around and beat her, and then they urinated on her. That wasn't enough. They dumped her bleeding, broken body in the back of a pickup truck, drove her off to some wayside road, found a rope, and then hoisted her up, put a noose around her neck, pulled her up, and were laughing as they dangled her, as her little feet dangled, groping for breath as she was strangling on the end of that rope. By the grace of God, before her neck snapped, her body weight broke the flimsy branch that she was on. She fell down a ravine into the river, and they left her in the river to drown to death. That's what they thought. But you know, God has a way. Yes, He does. Somehow or another, the current of the river washed her ashore. She was able to stagger to some people, found her along a roadside, took her home to her family. And as McConaughey went through those torturous details with the jury, with their eyes closed, he said finally, now imagine she was white. Their eyes came open. And he said that because he knew that he would never, in spite of all those details he just gave them, they would never summon the kind of sympathy for her that was due her unless they imagined she was white. Because they had been so conditioned by the air they breathed that the word black in front of little girl canceled out the sacredness of little girl. They heard black, not little girl. Now when black is in front of man, it's black and not man. When black is in front of woman, it's black and not woman. And because of the history of this country, the devaluing. Norm Stanford, who was the former police chief in Seattle, said this week in a meeting with some community leaders, they've done studies where 71 of police officers right here in Seattle admitted that when receiving calls in the black community, they have admitted that they have deliberately responded slower than in the white community. And he's 71% admitted it. It's probably more like 90%. It's just them. Them kill each other. The devaluing. And until America admits the way that it behaves, they won't change. And Trayvons, there'll be others. Long as that fear is out there, long as that hate and resentment is out there. And it doesn't just claim black lives. It doesn't just claim black lives. Because you all may remember about a year or so ago when David James, a 41-year-old Iraq veteran, he was killed by 71-year-old Trevor Dooley. David James was white. But he was playing basketball with his 8-year-old daughter. And another young man was skateboarding on the other half of the basketball court, and Zimmerman, white man, crossed the street. For whatever reason, don't like skateboarders, and told the young man, get off this basketball court with that skateboard. And when he did, David James, the 41-year-old white Iraq veteran, yelled back at the man, show me where it's written that he can't use a skateboard here on a basketball court. The man got angry. He knew he was in Florida, in a state that has stand your ground laws, took his 9mm pistol and went across the street to the park with all the kids, including David James' 8-year-old daughter, including all those children. He was going to show that man, you don't talk to him like that. And when David James saw Trevor Dooley coming with a pistol, being a soldier, and seeing all those kids around there, not knowing what he was going to do, he lunged at him to try and take him down and get the pistol away from him. And in the struggle, Trevor Dooley shot him in the chest and killed him, and then claimed self-defense. And because of that, Trevor Dooley has walked. He has not been arrested. There have been no investigation because he had the right to shoot and kill if he said that he felt threatened.